Welcome to Friends at Work podcast, the podcast about friendship, work, and the interrelation of the two.
Hi there, Toye here. This week, I learned a lot from Angelina Klouthis, the Executive Director of VFF USA. I met up with her at our office in DuPont Circle. She shares her vast experience living and working in different countries around the world, from Niger to Nicaragua to Spain and here in the US and many places in between. And she compares and contrasts her experiences communicating and making friends across multiple cultures and languages. Listen.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Angelina Klouthis, and I am the Executive Director for the Vicente Ferrer Foundation in the U.S., but a lot of my previous work experience has been in West Africa, so we've had a lot of fun chatting about how all of these different cultures where we work, whether they're Spain, India, Africa, or the U.S., can be really different, and it's not that they're good, it's not that they're bad, it's just that they're different, and really enjoying those differences and the different journeys that those differences can take you on.
Yeah, that's so how many languages do you speak?
I used to feel fairly confident saying that I spoke 7 languages, but lately I've really gotten quite rusty because if you don't use a language...
use or lose kind of situation?
Yeah, so I used to speak Hausa, Fulani, and Zarma really well, and I feel like today I can't say that's totally true. Like I'll never forget Hausa because I lived in Maradi in Niger for 3 amazing years.
Wow.
But I just kind of spoke conversationally, like Fulani with some of my neighbors who were there. So I definitely have started to mix things together in my head. It's just not a clear filing system. Like I can't just take out the folder on Hausa. Like it all kind of comes like together into one experience today.
Nice. So you want to say something? Say hello to us in Fulani or Hausa. Tell us which one you're doing.
Well, so in Hausa, before we even started this show, I probably would have asked you 20 questions, and it would have started with Ina Kwana, and the best response is Lahia Kalau. And then we would have kept going back and forth, asking you, how are you? How's your family? How's your health? How's your house? How's your everything?
How's your cat? How's your cow?
And you would have answered every single one of them in almost the identical same way, kind of like the American, I'm fine.
Yeah. In talking about culture, and this is something that I found very interesting, especially if you live in the rural areas in West Africa generally. You don't have the single hello, hi kind of situation in greetings. You have like the string of greetings, and you have to keep saying, oh, I'm fine, or it's great, and you have to ask after every single thing. So did you have that experience when you were in Niger?
Yeah, I had that experience, and I had it like kind of on steroids because I grew up about 20 minutes away from the Canadian border in Maine, and so I speak French fairly fluently. And so then I moved to Niger, and I'm doing half of my work in Hausa, and then I'm doing some of my work in Frausa, which is French Hausa, I guess. And so I had this like conversation with a French guy, and I remember asking him like, and how's your body, sir? In French, like, how's your house? And he like looked at me like I was absolutely from another planet, but it's because I'd been speaking Frausa for so long that it just kind of it shouldn't mix together maybe.
Yeah. And this conversation can go in many different directions. But now that you talked about French, and this is something that I find interesting. So I read an article, I think it was in The Economist, where they talked about French people from France who immigrated to Canada had problems with the Canadian culture of how they spoke French, where you would say tu, and you, for somebody that you're familiar with in France, they would use vous for somebody the French from France would use vous for a stranger, but I think there's a mix of the American thinking into the French that's spoken in Canada, where it's like cut through the distance and go to tu, like a2, rather than vous. And a lot of French people were finding that very intrusive. Like, I don't know you, why are you talking to me in familiar tones? And I think that's the same kind of thing that you describe with the thinking behind the Frauser. This is the first time I'm hearing that term, by the way, Frauser. And you bring in the West African thinking or the Niger thinking into the French, the Canadian French, or the French thinking of how they interpret the language.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's
that?
really wild because, like, what kind of accent do I have today when I speak French?
Okay.
Like, it's definitely not a Canadian accent, even though, like, I grew up on the Canadian border speaking with Canadians on a pretty regular basis. It's certainly not a French from France accent, because that's never something I've fully felt comfortable trying to pretend. And it's definitely not an African accent, but I have been accused of learning French in Africa on a number of occasions.
Interesting.
Which has been really, like, Africans are by far the best teachers because they're super patient, like patience first. And then they're also, like, willing to be both informal and formal at the same time. So you get a great diversity of, like, words and, like, ways to conjugate things that you wouldn't necessarily get from a French person from France or from a Canadian, because the Canadians are a little bit more informal and they invent some really special words, just like in everywhere else. Like, you know, everybody has their own vocabulary that they, or every community, every culture does. And so, like, relearn, like, my vocabulary is very rural West African and not very Canadian at this point in time. And it's interesting when I am at work or in formal settings or, like, traveling, the responses and reactions I get.
Interesting. So, friends at work. I've told you a bit about what this podcast is about, and for our listeners, Friends at Work, just to summarize again, is a podcast about relationships at work and how they help or hinder us in our movement, you know, in our career and in general life well-being. So, what would be your earliest memory of a friendship at work that you made? It doesn't have to be the first memory, but your earliest memory of someone that you'd be like, this person was a friend at work. And so let me step back a bit and also bring something we talked about, before we started this recording, about the definitions of workplace friendships from one culture or context to the other. Where in America, you can be work friends and not be personal friends at all, have nothing to do with each other in your personal lives, or you could be personal friends and not be work friends. And so however you want to take that, the idea of friendship at work, I'm not going to put you in a box and say, this person was a friend at work, and how did they impact you?
I guess, like, I'm truly, like, even though I've been strongly influenced by some amazing, friendly, outgoing, like, warm, welcoming people, and it's made me more open to friendships at work than probably an average American. At the end of the day, like, most of my experiences have been in the U.S., and so therefore I recognize that I have, like, U.S. glasses on when I look at friendships. Mm-hmm. And so I know I could take them off, but I kind of leave the glasses on because they're a part of my identity. Mm-hmm. Like, I can at least remove them and kind of take a peek up and be like, oh yeah, that's what that looks like for other people. And so, like, it was really shocking to me when I lived in Niger in 2005 that everybody that I worked with also wanted to be my friend. Like, I didn't anticipate that. Like, I thought I'd have to find friends in different spaces, right? Like, I need to, like, figure out how to make friends in another venue, and for them it was like, why are you asking us where do I go to make friends? Like, why are you're my friend, like you are part of my community. And it was and I'll never forget, like, the first time I got really truly kind of sick, and I was like thinking to myself, like, I have no friends, I have no family, I'm really far away, like, what's going on? Like, this really is tough. And as soon as my coworkers, who in my mind were just coworkers,
yeah,
started showing up at my house and like sitting next to my bed, and I remember being like, I don't really have chairs here, like I hadn't really furnished my modest accommodations very well,
yeah,
like, and thinking like how badly I wanted to like be alone, because there's some gross things that happen when you're sick that you don't necessarily need witnesses to.
Exactly.
But they were like, no, we're here for you, we're just gonna stay and watch. And I'm like, and I just remember thinking, like, even my best friends wouldn't watch me throw up, right? So like, why would my coworker want to? And it just really like blurred this definition for me. And it was like that first time of like this sense of like community over self, like if you're sick, then we're all sick and we're just gonna hang out until you get better, versus in the US it's like, oh, you're sick, stay away, I don't want to get infected. And it was a totally like, and that's when I finally realized, like, these people weren't just my coworkers, they weren't just the people that I like saw when I walked into the office on like Monday through Friday. Like, they were people who were going to take care of me no matter what. And then there was this overwhelming burden that I should also probably try to pay that back. And it's really difficult when you don't know all of the rules about. It was so easy for them to be there for me, but it was so hard for me to figure out how to be there for them.
And that's something that I find interesting about the American culture, as somebody who grew up outside it and who's now living in it, where there's this sense of I owe you, or you owe me this favor, or I owe you that favor. I did not grow up with it. I have no sense of it. I have to put it on. I have to think about it, and as a West African and Nigerian, I need to tell you, the people weren't expecting you to. I'm sure you know this, though. From what we talked about, they were not necessarily expecting you. They weren't thinking that you owe them back.
No, but there's like a.
But it's a communal thing.
If they're gonna sit by my bed while I'm sick, however uncomfortable that might make me, because it makes them comfortable and it makes them happy to be there for me, then I should also sit by their bed if they're sick, because otherwise, like, there's like this like need to keep it even. If you scratch my back, I should literally be willing to scratch your back, right?
Yes.
Like, if you'll lend me $10, then I should also be willing to lend you $10. And it was really weird to me because no one had that same thought process.
Yeah.
Or I couldn't figure it out. I never could figure out how to pay back my debts. And I'll probably for the rest of my life feel incredibly indebted to every single person I met on this experience, because they did so much more for me than I could have ever done for them. You know, like, I went to Niger and I thought, oh, I'm going to be writing these grants at this agricultural research institute. I'm going to give so much, right? And I'm sure I like did some really good grant writing. We got some really cool projects funded, but I didn't give nearly as much as I received. Like, I learned some of the best lessons in my life, and I'll never get to a point where I don't feel indebted to these people and everything they taught me, like all the lessons I learned and all of the things I got out of the experience. Like, I won so much more than I ever imagined.
I think that's a good feeling too,
Debt doesn't feel good, but feeling like you got a lot out of something does feel good. But I want to figure out one day how to repay that debt.
That's and that's the interesting thing about our understanding of these things, where I think the idea that I get from it and that I'm taught on how to do this is paid forward, kind of, where I don't have to pay you back. But you're thinking, oh, I owe this person, this favor. Why do I have to pay this other person?
Well, it's just this communal sense. Like, I think the number one value in West Africa can be isn't it? It's not an individual thing, right? Like, in the US, it's all about like how much money can I make? And when I have money and when I accumulate this wealth, it can impact my family and my friends, etc. But I think Africans have a totally different perspective, and it's not how much money can I make, it's how much, it's about how can we best distribute the things that we have. Like how can we make sure everyone's okay? Like how can everyone eat versus it's like how can I get caviar? You're like how can everyone have some tuo? And so you're just better at this like pay it forward concept because you've always had it. And it's kind of a new idea here where like you buy the coffee for the person behind you in line at Starbucks, and all of the like social media posts about it, and this like self-congratulatory thing. Like that would never have happened
exactly
in Niger, in Cameroon, anywhere that I've lived where people just do it every day. It's a part of who they are.
Yeah, now that you bring up that issue, it's one of those things that I find very interesting about the American media, about stuff like that. You pay for somebody behind you, and then it becomes this news story. You leave this big tip for the waitress or the waiter, and it becomes like a huge section of the newspaper. And these are awesome things, by the way. It's just that they happen so often in our communities that people, it's like, oh, okay, so what's new? Like, this is not news. Really, this happens all the time where I come from, but it seems like it's such a new concept in America. And I hope it becomes even more ingrained. And that's not saying that there aren't a lot of nice and giving people in America. I'm just saying that the idea of community, the way you've described and have experienced in Niger and Cameroon, and which is also true in Nigeria and many other African communities, is just how life is community. And I think everybody's just trying to strike the balance between the individual and community. But here is so much more about what's in it for me, It's the WIIFM. That's the radio station the average American tunes into. And it would be nice to do what's in it for us as well.
Right.
Kind of thinking, yeah.
But one thing comes to mind, like when you were speaking, I was thinking about how maybe the reason we have such great media coverage of the guy who left the $1,000 tip to the waitress is because we don't have the same culture of storytelling. And so like I think West Africans are much better storytellers, and so your news isn't about telling stories, it's more about like actual news.
Yeah. Okay, true. And
so in
that's
our
a
defense,
perspective. That's a perspective. Well, I will take that. I will take that on behalf of all the West Africans I know. Yeah, we do more with news than with storytelling. I do see what your point of view on that.
And the second thing that's kind of like weird to me and that I've never really thought about, and I'd like to figure it out, right, is Americans are so well known for having this culture of philanthropy, right? Like we were for many, many years the number one country to give to causes. Of course, with that what's in it for me mentality of giving our extra crops to people and then bankrupting local farmers when we gave them away, right? Mm-hmm. But there's this like culture of like giving, right? And giving to others and charity, which is really special and really wonderful and something that should be celebrated. But it bothers me to hear people say that Americans have this culture of philanthropy, that we're the number one givers, and we're not. Malaysia is now the number one country to give, right? But we're still pretty high up there, and it's part of our culture, but you guys don't count it. And if we were to count Nigeria's giving, you wouldn't be able to count it in the same way. It's not giving to a complete and total stranger. It's giving to your aunt's cousin's friend who needed it. It's giving in a way that's a lot more personable and a lot more... Like, are you possibly the most charitable region of the world? You just haven't quantified it. Like,
who knows?
We have.
Americans quantify, but I think that's an advantage. What you quantify, you can measure, and you can then use that, and which is what America tends to use, measure everything in detail, and then say we're the best. but I feel like the purpose for measurement sometimes eludes me. Like in sports, it drives me nuts. I'm like, I just want to watch the game. I don't want to know how many times this person did this, trying to, like this is his 1,000th shot. I don't know. It's just Americans, there's so much measurement that it takes the fun out of some things for me. It's like, can I watch a basketball game and say this one game was great? I don't want to know how it was in comparison to all the other games. I just want to watch this game. I know this is a very strange thing for some people, but when it comes to other areas, say business or even philanthropy, like you talked about, I think it's an awesome thing to be able to measure so that you can know whether to increase it, to decrease it, or how you're doing with it. But I think more importantly, finding a middle ground between how certain things are done as a way of life. I mean, my parents are not the unique in what I'm about to say. My parents have paid so many people's school fees. I don't even know if my dad knows how many people's school fees he paid up to university level.
Because he didn't count them.
He doesn't, and he's not the only one. I mean, I know so many families around too who will pick up a total stranger. I mean, I know that my dad sent someone from Ghana to school all the way. Somebody met on the street and just kind of liked the guy, and the guy was good. They paid his school fees all through university. And I don't think my dad has seen him since he graduated. They're not in touch, not that I'm aware of. And this has been like 15 years ago. And there are many people like that, not just my dad. And it's a very cultural thing where I come from, where you just help people out if you can, and that's it. And you don't necessarily ask anything back. Some people do, but in a general sense, most people don't. It's just like, this is what you do. You help people.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate because I bet if we measured the success of your dad's scholarship program compared to which I know it's not an official scholarship program, It has no application, it has no rhyme or reason that one could actually write down, right? But I bet your dad's scholarship program has helped more people in a more profound way than a lot of other scholarship programs that have impacted the same number of people. And I think it's a shame that we can't measure it, right? Because if we could measure it, we could learn something about giving. Like when you give to a person, you feel that one-on-one connection, the responsibility that person has in receiving this gift is then greater. It's not like mystery money. And then the things that they do with it in their future to pay others back or to pay others for it, I think is also greater. And I think that's part of the problem with the business of philanthropy in the U.S. is you don't get to feel connected to the person that you're giving to, and then the person that receives it also doesn't feel connected. And
connected to the people who, And
I think that's one of the things I really like about my current job is that I get to give people on both ends who are equal partners, right? Because your dad's not paying for this kid to go to school because he wants to. He sees him as a future, as the future of the world, right? And so like treating people like they're an equal partner, and like this is your responsibility is to keep learning and to do better, and my responsibility is to help you make that happen. And treating people like equal partners, but also making those connections. I think that's the coolest thing about my job is that I get to make those one-on-one connections and those like long-lasting friendships a little bit stronger. And I'm not nearly as expert at it as the average African. And I think there's still so much more that I could learn.
And thank you for speaking so well about Africans. And my head is swelling a bit on behalf of all Africans that you have such good views of us, and I do appreciate that. We've talked a bit about identity. We talked a bit about culture. But I want us to, go stronger into this conversation about friendship at work.
Okay.
And have you had any interesting friends at work that, when I say interesting, I'm definitely deliberately using that as a blanket statement. Interesting is one of those English words that can be infused with all sorts of meanings, right? And so I want you to go in any direction you want with that. Friends at work that have been good, bad, or that helped your career or hindered your career, or just some. Can you think of a story of someone you had interaction with at work? Let's start with the positive side, that you'll be like, this person or this group of people made a conscious effort to have a relationship with me and help me through to get to where I am right now. If there are.
I have some amazing friends at work who I think, because my job is purpose driven, right? Like, we're coming together not to make money, not to produce an item, not to make widgets or hujafadjas, but to make real change in people's lives, is that when you're united around a single mission, a mission to help others or to empower rural communities, then it's more likely, I'm at an extreme advantage, and it's more likely to become friends with people that you work with, because you have a shared vision, a shared mission, and a shared desire to bring about positive change in communities. And so the organization that I work for right now is a monstrosity of an organization in India. It's 2,500 amazing local employees. Almost all of our employees in India are from the region that we work in, and they consider me their friend, and I don't know them all, and it's overwhelmingly it's a lot, and it's exciting to feel like I have this amazing connection. And then we have a Spanish office, and there's about 200 employees there, and they're more Western, and so we don't consider each other friends. We're just coworkers, and I really get that, because that's like part of how I function. And then our U.S. office, though, is what's really interesting, is we have about 38 volunteers and interns, completely unpaid, and they come together and they just give of their time and of themselves and whatever they can to help us build a really successful project in U.S. office. So the U.S. office for our organization's only been open for about a year and a half. And in that year and a half, we've grown our team. There's only 2 paid employees, and everyone else who works there is working as a volunteer or as an intern. And sure, there is that what's in it for me. And for a lot of them, it's like, oh, I want this kind of job experience because this is the job I want in the future. So please let me be a part of it. For other people, it's like they need to balance out their 9 to 5 of accumulating wealth with a 5 to 9 that's about being more human. And so I'm really lucky in that I have this amazing team of volunteers who are now also part of my friends. And I've learned one thing that I think is really notable about our organization, which is something I didn't realize how important it was. In the U.S., when it's lunch break time, I would say that everyone, blanket statements are never fair, but almost everyone is going to take their lunch and eat it at their desk while looking at their Facebook, or they'll go to a corner in the office building and they'll eat lunch by themselves. And it's not necessarily like a social thing. And at VFF USA, every single one of us stops. We take our lunch break together. We have lunch, and then we come back to the office, and no one eats alone, and no one is eating alone. And I think that it was easy for me to adopt, because in West Africa, no one eats alone. Yeah. Food's for everyone, food's for sharing. But in Spain as well, people don't take their lunch to their desk and eat it by themselves. And it's probably one of the most beautiful things I think about the kind of the culture in our office, is that we share food. We literally are sharing food with each other, like eating off of each other's plates. But more importantly, we share that time, that social time that I don't know that you actually get anywhere else. And I think that helped facilitate a friendship that went beyond a work relationship.
I think that's awesome. I mean, you touch on so many interesting things in my mind right now about friendships at work, about life generally. I haven't read Sheryl Sandberg's latest book, but she said, and she wrote Lean In, and she there was a statement that was quoted somewhere that she said, bringing your whole self to work. That just stuck with me, the idea of bringing your whole self to work. And I don't see that, and it's one of the things that inspired this podcast, that I don't see that in American culture, generally speaking. people bring their work self to work and leave their personal self outside. And finding a US-based nonprofit working the way you work, I mean, doesn't that help you have a more fulfilled? I think there's a psychological rest. I think, and I've experienced this personally. I don't know if everybody else has, or if you have. Even if the work is difficult, there's a psychological rest when you don't have to fully compartmentalize. That's not saying that you just pour out everything on the table.
You can bring your whole self to work without bringing like every detail of your intimate life to work.
Exactly. But I mean, but you're not stressed out. You're not stressed out at work in your mind, because I feel a lot of people have that stress of that added layer of stress to the actual work they do, when they have to keep compartmentalizing and thinking, how friendly should I get with this person? Or am I being too friendly? Or can I use my relationships with this person to get to the next thing I need to? So do I need to suck up to this person? Do I need to study this person well so that I can get... I mean, there's a little bit of all of that still, even in West Africa and other cultures where there are communities, but there's still this idea of being fully yourself at work. So that's just a commentary, but the question I want to ask is, you've presented a very pretty picture in my mind now of all the experiences in West Africa at your current job. Has there been any, and I think you've worked, I know you've worked long enough for you to have had good and bad experiences, and you don't have to name names or anything. We actually had somebody on the show who actually named names.
Ooh, uncomfortable.
But where there was a situation where you felt like maybe being too friendly, especially being too friendly maybe because you're female, or being too or not friendly enough, or your friendliness was, or lack thereof, was misinterpreted, that caused some friction in some ways.
I mean, I prefer not to talk about negative things, right? But yeah, I've had hundreds. I've had
his life,
thousands.
really. I like the balance of both, and I think it's everybody knows this happens, but we can't keep hiding certain things from there.
I've had thousands of negative experiences. Like, it is really difficult to be the only white person for hundreds of miles in West Africa and to stand out like a glow-in-the-dark light, right? It is really difficult to be doing your work in a language that's new to you. Like, no matter how fluent you are, it's still an extra. It's not your mother tongue, so you can express yourself. You can only express yourself so well in this other language, especially when you're angry, right? And there have been so many mistakes that I've made, like, linguistically, as well as, like, but more than like that, it's not about like, oh, I speak this language and I can express my point. But my team and I, we have this problem. I have a couple of members of my team who are from Spain, and so I'll write them an email that says, hey, welcome to the office. Number 1, do this. Number 2, do this. Number 3, get this done, right? And that was like and they're like, that's super rude.
Interesting. Tell me.
And so apparently one should start the email with, how was your weekend? How's life? How's this? I hope everything's okay. And that it's better to kind of not put the list in, and it's better to kind of combine it all in. And so it'd be cool if you could do this, and then once you finish that, if you have time, that you would do. And for me, that's I see that as being rude. Like, please don't write me an email like that. I don't know what you need from me. It's not clear to me. You're wasting my time. You're making me really read through all of this red tape. Like, to me, you writing this super polite and long email that kind of has a list of things for me to do in it, but I can't quite tell, is more offensive than writing 1, 2, 3, get this done. And so for my colleagues, it's the reverse. And I think we get to learn a lot from each other in that. And I think, race is obviously, there's a lot of lessons I've learned being the only white person there's a lot of lessons I've learned being the only female. I'm I'm a female executive director of an office, which is definitely exciting, and it's the way, but it's also there's some really interesting challenges. And in my other jobs in the past, and I've traveled around the world, like being a woman in pick a country is not necessarily having the same amount of power, and including my own, right? Like we're really far behind in terms of no one's quite caught up to like what equality or equity should really and could really look like, and how that translates. And I think it is only like seen through the bigger magnifying glass when you add a language barrier to it. So something that seems like such a friendly joke in your culture, in your language, is not a friendly joke when I translate it in my head. I think those are probably, and they're just misunderstandings, right? They're not, no one was insulting me, and I wasn't insulting anyone, but when you add this extra layer, it just gets magnified. And so there's probably a million cases like that I could think of. And I have a favorite language mistake, I think, and it's in Spanish, which I know most of your listeners don't probably speak, but there's a difference in the verb to be. There's a verb to be that's ser, and there's a verb to be that's estar, but in English we only have one of this verb. So I have a really hard time kind of conversationally after a beer differentiating between them. I know the rules, I know how it's supposed to be, but I remember calling this lady once, and I was moving and I wanted some help like packing and like organizing things, and my neighbor said to me, oh well, this lady, she's really good at that, she come in, she's super cheap, she's really trustworthy, and she could use the work, so if you need somebody on Wednesday, you should call her. So I decided in that moment, it was seize the moment, let's call her, right? And I say like that she is really
say
good.
It in Spanish.
Like, está muy buena, which is different than being es muy buena. One means that the person's really sexy, and the other means that the person's really qualified or really good. And so I made that mistake, and it's just funny, like if you can take things with a good sense of humor, and she did, and she didn't accuse me of sexual harassment, and I didn't, she just understood that I was, first of all, I came at it with an accent, so it wasn't going to be my first language, and second of all, she gave me the benefit of the doubt. And so because she gave me that benefit of the doubt the time I called her super sexy and asked her to come over and move my boxes, I'd like to try to give people the benefit of the doubt as well, because it could just be a language thing as much as it could be a cultural thing, as much as it could be historically this joke has always been funny, and we're in a really cool moment of change where the same funny jokes aren't actually funny when we realize the harm that they're causing, and trying to make that conversion. If you can just give people the benefit of the doubt, you're going to be a lot better off.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting story. It reminds me, I was laughing hard, off mic, because I remembered a friend of mine who, I'm mixing two stories up, but this happened. She went to Africa, to an African country for a project, and she's a little on the bigger side. I know which is a very difficult thing to talk about in America. But so many men were hitting on her because they really loved her. And one guy walked up to her and said, you are so beautiful. I think this was in Kenya. You're so beautiful that you remind me of my cow. Just now it didn't translate at all. But what the guy was saying in his culture was one of the most beautiful things he could have said to her. But she understood that he was really being nice. But she's like, I'm American. You don't tell a woman you reminds you of a cow. And it's one of those things that sometimes you get lost in translation because of cultural differences and ideas that are important in those cultures that could go against each other. I mean, I can imagine walking out on the street in front of this building and saying hi to a woman and say, and telling her she looks like a cow, I might get arrested. At least I will get
You'd at least
assaulted.
get a slap. Yeah.
You understand? And so it's a different thing. So, and that's why I liked that especially your international experience also takes this conversation in a different, direction than it's gone in my previous conversations with guests on this show, which is things can get lost in translation, and just what friendship means in one context is not necessarily what it means in another. But I want to, as we round up our conversation on this subject, I'm first of all curious about how would you tell us some of the places you worked in, and how would you, some of the countries you worked in, how would you compare the different relationships you've had at work in those contexts? Like, I know you've touched a bit on this in our general conversation, but this is a more focused thing. Like, I've heard you've told us you worked in Niger, in Cameroon, in India, in the US, and what other places that you can tell us that you worked in, and how would you compare? What would be your comparison of friendships, and relationships in those contexts? And where I'm going to eventually is, would you say friendship at work is a pro or a con? So that's where I want to end. I'm giving you this cheat sheet. Look far down the line. So that's why the comparison.
Well, I think like what's unique about my life is that like when I move to a new place, it's typically because of work, right? So where is my first point of entry is the office, and it's the only place that I can go to make friends, essentially. And so I have worked in Niger, Nicaragua, Colombia, Haiti. I've worked all over like the Caribbean on a variety of different projects, and most recently in India. And no matter where I go, there's a few things that are always true. As a blanket statement, it is always true that everywhere I go, people are warm and welcoming to me. And it could be because I'm having this new experience and I'm super excited about it, and what you put out is what you get back, right? So like when I go to pick a place in the world and I'm excited about being there, people want to share in that excitement. And when I come back to the US, maybe I'm not as excited about being back here, and so people will find things to commiserate with me about. But the first place that I go and I look for to make connections is in the workplace, or it's to accomplish a specific project. And I've really found that when the shoes are on the other foot, when I'm in the US and I'm trying to make new friends, like I've really struggled. I've only been in DC for a year and a half, and I don't really feel like I have very many friends here. And I could never have said the same thing after being anywhere else I've ever lived outside of the US for this period of time. Like, people would have been my friend. They would have, and it's not that they felt bad for me. They just would, like, you're here, so you're my friend automatically. Whether you want to be or not, we're going to be friends and deal with it. Here's an invitation to somebody's wedding. We're going. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't necessarily happen here. And I think it's a struggle of mine, because as much as I love my country and I'm from here, like, I miss that. I miss making friends with people for absolutely no reason, if we have absolutely no shared interests and totally different lives. But one thing that can be kind of difficult, I think, to balance is a lot of times if I'm the American, I'm coming in as the funder, especially in international development projects. And so I think that sometimes that friendship can feel uncomfortable, because if I'm giving you something, I always wonder, like, are you being my friend because you feel like I have access to money or access to resources? And at first I had those doubts a lot. And every now and then that American doubt will weasel its way into my head. But I've actually found that it's most of the time not true at all. Like, you're my friend because you're friendly with everyone. So no matter where I go, I'm really just astounded by the hospitality, the focus on family, the focus on including people no matter what. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I wish that more Americans could have those experiences, because if more Americans had to ask the silly question about where the market is in the middle of a desert, then more Americans would be willing to listen to other people when they ask those same questions when they're in their US. And so I really like being back in my homeland, because I love being able to answer the most basic questions. Because so many other people have done that favor to me. Like I've asked some really ridiculous questions, and now I'm able to answer some of those as well, and it feels really good to be able to do that. So making friends at work for me is a really important way to kind of pay it back, to say like I had a lot of friends wherever I went, and now I'd like to continue opening doors for people and making new connections because of what I've learned and experienced in all these other places.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Friends at Work with Toye. I'd like to thank my guest Angelina for her wonderful insights and for taking time out of her busy schedule to sit and talk with me. What stood out to you the most? Please share your thoughts with me via email or social media. You can connect with me on Twitter at Friends at Work US and like the podcast Facebook page at Friends at Work Podcast. Also tell your friends and colleagues about this podcast. The Twitter handle again is Friends at Work US, and the Facebook page is Friends at Work Podcast. If you have a topic you want me to explore, or know someone interesting that I should talk to, or just want to say hello, please email me at myfriendtoye@gmail.com. That's myfriendToye@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed listening, kindly give me a 5-star rating on iTunes. It would help new listeners discover the show faster. All the music on this podcast was produced by Austin Foster. He worked some of his magic to make the production sound better. Thanks, Austin. Join us next time for another episode of Friends at Work with Toye. Till then, keep smiling, help a stranger, lend a helping hand to a neighbor. In so doing, you make a tough world more bearable, even more enjoyable for others and yourself. Bye for now.